Okay, here we go. We're gonna make some happy shit. In today's video, I'll be making a doll based off of the Piranha plant from Super Mario Bros. My unusual subject is part of a special collaboration with some awesome artists. The theme was sexy game characters, so of course I chose that evil biting plant to turn into a seductive monster. I did a few concept sketches, but landed on this design. Before we get into bringing her to life, let's check out the rest of the artists and their bombastic babes. There was our amazing host, his name is Akin. Val Kitty's World. Myself. Stitchwick Creations. Sky the Golden. One of a Kind Nara. Munquita Cat. Kietbi Sugaru. Harley's Dollhouse. H. Ollie Crafts. Uni Dolls. And Artie Sin. If you like video games, definitely make sure to check out everyone's videos. For my creation, I wanted to use this busted Headmistress BloodGood. Her hands had been chewed, so I'm replacing them with a pair of Apple White's hands. BloodGood's face is very sharp with high cheekbones, but I wanted something softer with an open smile instead. So I'll be swapping with this budget Anna's head. I prepped the doll as usual, acetone to remove the face, cut the hair, and pull out the plugs and gunk with pliers. I paint her scalp with a mix of acrylic and Mod Podge. I'll be rerooting her with a mix of green nylon from the Doll Planet. The outer edges of the hair and the part take the most time to fill, so I tackle these first. I hold the thread over my thumb and slide the needle gently along my fingernail, scooping the fibers into the needle. Then plunge into the head repeatedly. It's very subtle on camera, but you can see here that there are slightly different shades of green. I finish up by working in rows until the head is covered. Then I fill the head with Fabri-Tac glue and let her dry overnight. I thatch the part and hold the hair in place with a rubber band. With the assistance of my favorite teapot, I pour boiling water over the hair. Here's how it looks fully dry. Having no lower legs is not an issue, but this body still needs a lot of work. I'm going to be sculpting over the legs and painting part of the torso later, so I need to sand the body in preparation. I also want to remove the molded on underwear. You can do this with nail buffers, but a rotary tool is much faster. I use different bits to get into all the small spaces and remove the bumps. I'll be using 2-part epoxy sculpt next. I'm going to make the green pipe and stand using this old jelly jar and wooden circle. I mix the epoxy off camera. Don't worry, I show this later on. I cover the outside of the jar, smoothing the surface and adding weight. My spritz bottle is full of alcohol that I use to smooth the clay. This is a very sculpt-heavy project. Very little doll went into this custom repaint. Here we go. I add 2 equal parts of A and B to my best guess and mix them. Now I'm going to fill her hips with clay and give her a booty mod. This was fun because I've done chest modifications a few times, but I've never tackled any lower mods yet. I thought about also doing a boob job, but decided against it, so she had a less typical sexy body type. It's ironic because this is a big sister doll and has a larger chest than the other Monster High dolls do, but her chest ends up feeling almost small by the end. I also fill the area around her knees with epoxy. I'll be connecting her directly to the plant mouth later, and I need something strong to build onto. I was toying with the idea of her being detachable at this point, so I flattened the bottom. I'm jumping back to the pipe stand now. I'm going back and forth so that I can keep making progress while the other pieces cure. I roll out a large snake and smoosh it into the top of the jar. This will be the iconic rim of the pipe. The jar was getting pretty heavy, so I switched to air dry clay to finish up the shape. After kneading the clay forever, I roll out a small piece to fill in the gap under the rim. I have another spritz bottle I'm using to wet the clay, but this bottle is filled with water instead of alcohol. I use a plastic flat-ended clay tool to clean up the shape. Because I use two types of clay, I want to give everything a coat in Elmer's glue all. This will help strengthen and bridge any gaps that may be left as the air dry clay dries. I cover the bottom of the jar with hot glue and attach it to the wooden base. This isn't very secure on its own, so I also go around the bottom of the jar. Now I'm going to give it a little mound of air dry clay covering the wooden circle. I hot glue some foil down to build up the shape. I want this to be reminiscent of the hills you see in the background of Mario games. I smooshed the same air dry clay from before into the foil and up against the pipe. I left little bumps in the hill since it's supposed to be terrain. After drying for a day, I use this acrylic paint in hunter green to coat the hill. I knew I needed a lot, so I just poured it over the clay. I also gave the clay a layer of Mod Podge before starting to paint. Using my brightest green paint, I paint the pipe. I don't bother with the inside. It will be filled with something else later. Instead, I focus on the parts that will be visible. I wanted to make the base look more like grass, so I decided to try painting in some stylized highlights. I also gave the pipe some shading. I quickly realized I didn't like the fake highlights, so I'm going to cover it in a mix of Pearl X powder and gloss instead. I just dump some of the pigment into the gloss and mix it. Then apply it like paint. This will be more or less transparent depending on how much pigment you mix with your varnish. This will be a display piece, and I want the bottom of the stand not to slip or scratch the surface it is on. I trace the shape of the wood onto a thin piece of felt and cut it out. I'll be using Elmer's glue all to attach the felt. I work in a spiral design so that it is coated evenly. And I just press the stand into the glue. It's nice and secure after drying and matches the color pretty well. I consider the pipe part kind of boring and methodical. Now it's time for something more fun. I need to make the leaves and the base of the plant. This will be the structure that everything above the pipe will be attached to. I mixed up some more epoxy sculpt off camera and cut some aluminum wire for the armature. This won't move, so the wire doesn't have to be very strong, but I don't want it to break while I'm building up the shape. I roll out a snake and spiral it up the wire. Then I squish it into a solid mass. I do the same around the foil and pop it into the pipe, making sure that it fits easily. I start on the leaves while I wait for the epoxy to harden. I draw out several leaf designs based on my concept sketch, then I trace them onto a sheet of Worbla Thermoplastic. I cut each of the pieces out. Larger scissors are good for simpler shapes, and smaller scissors work well for more intricate designs. I did this wavy leaf off camera to test the technique. Previously, I only had a hairdryer for heating Worbla, so I wasn't sure what to expect from my new heat gun. It did a much better job at heating the plastic without blowing it around and was much more concentrated. To shape the leaf, I'm pinching the middle and the points of the edges. I'm also giving a small ripple and curving the stem. I hold the leaf while it cools so it retains the curve. There are also a few vines in the design. To make these, I cut out a thin rectangle and heat it. Then I roll it and pinch the end to make it pointy. I thread this through my fingers so it looks like it's sliding through the air. The mouth of the plant opens up close to the stem, so I need to start building that structure. I don't want to use epoxy because of how heavy it is, and other clays are likely to crack. So instead, I'm wrapping some scrap Worbla pieces around the stem. Worbla sticks well to itself, so this will make attaching the leaves and vines to the base much easier. I just reheat the ends and press them into the structure, holding each piece upright as it cools so that they don't sag. I take another vine-like piece and wrap it around the leaves and vines to secure them even better and add a little more visual interest. Now to make the very modest leaf bikini. I cut out and heated 2 cups for the top, then shaped them to the doll while hot. To sculpt the details into the leaves, I use a metal clay tool. There's also a leaf for her bottom. I attach and sculpt this in the same way I did the top. It just takes a little more work to get it into the right shape. So the fun thing about this character is that the girl is actually the tongue of the plant. Her legs are fused together and her body sprouts up out of the open mouth, acting as bait much like the lantern on an anglerfish does. Now I'm just using Crayola Model Magic to bulk up the base so that it fills the pipe better. I don't really want the plant wobbling around later. Next, I make the armature for the mouth of the plant. I cut some wire to length and hot glue it to the Worbla. I do a few for each side of the mouth. Then I glue more wire so that it is perpendicular. I weave this because the hot glue is not very strong in such small amounts. It's going to get harder to maneuver if I continue, so I switch gears and paint the leaves. I mix a bright green with a little brown to make a duller green color. At this point, I had so many greens happening and I wanted to be careful to give them enough variety in hue and saturation. Okay, back to the mouth of the plant. I fold some aluminum foil and wrap it around the wire. I work back and forth, crisscrossing the foil for strength. You can finally see it starting to take shape after enough layers. I was honestly kind of lost on how to make this. It's a much bigger project than I normally do. Up to now, I was just guessing at how I would put everything together without it breaking. I'm pretty happy my engineering held together this far. Continuing, I'm adding more Model Magic around the foil and blending it together with water. I had to use almost 2 pounds of Model Magic and it started cracking badly as it dried, so I knew I had to try something else. I cut a relatively large piece of Worbla and heated it to the clay. I needed a much stronger surface to sculpt the rest of the mouth on top of, and Worbla made the most sense. It also weighs much less than even my lightest clay. I meld the front and back pieces together at the sides. I don't need to worry about this seam showing as it will be covered later. Next, I sculpted a seat for the doll. I used Crayola Air Dry Clay for this and the next part, the gums and the lips. I don't think this clay is very high quality. It's marketed towards kids and classrooms, but I had tried 3 others and none of them wanted to stick to the Worbla. Epoxy probably would have worked, but it would have been too heavy. I've used this clay for other projects and it usually split or broke. It feels pretty weak. So I was very surprised that this performed the best. I'm just taking the lips in sections, pushing the clay around the edges, then adding wrinkles with different tools. I also added some bumps to the inside of the mouth. I use Super Sculpey 3 to make the teeth. To form a tooth, I broke a small piece off and rolled it into a ball. And then I rolled one side of the ball so it was tapered, and pinched the tip. I make bigger teeth by connecting 2 different shaped pieces together in the middle. Before baking, I press each tooth into the lip so that the bottom has the right curve. She's starting to take shape now. I bake according to the package instructions and glue each tooth to the mouth, trying my best to find where it was originally pressed. I definitely put some in the wrong place, and there are gaps. So to fill that, and to add a layer of gums, I pour hot glue around the edges of the mouth and around each tooth. I also add strings of glue to the inside. I want this to match the veining that I gave the doll's legs earlier. It's finally time to paint this thing. Using bright red acrylic paint, I cover the outside of the mouth. Earlier, I sculpted the white bumps off camera using the same Crayola Air Dry Clay. I don't really try to avoid painting these, as they'll get their own coat of cool white later. Now, actually, I expected to have to do several coats of white to cover the mess that I made with red paint, but I only ended up needing to do 2. This is folk art paint in wicker white, and it's pretty opaque. I use the same white paint to color the lips. I'll be using this raspberry wine paint mixed with white for the flesh on the inside of the mouth. While I have it mixed up, I'll give the legs a layer so that it matches the mouth color. I want her to blend into the plant as seamlessly as she can. My son wanted to make sure I didn't forget to color her leaf bra. I mix in even more white and paint the gums. I also did a little dry brushing over the veins for the tongue. Then I brush over the raised surfaces with a lighter shade of pink to accentuate the highlights. Next, I blend the pink of the tongue color into the flesh of the doll. I work from the bottom up with lighter and lighter shades of pink as I go. Then I blend a light flesh tone back down into the pink for a smooth transition. Switching back to the mouth, I mix a variety of warm tones to make a bright yellowish green for the teeth. Now I'm going in with green gouache paint and painting the leaves. I gave the body a spray of MSC before starting so that I could easily wipe away any mistakes with water. Since she's already sealed, I go ahead and blush the body ahead of time. Then I can lock in the paint and blush in one layer. When I sculpted her lower half, I got epoxy all over the torso. I could have cleaned it off while it was wet, but I decided that the texture would help make her skin look less human and more fabricated. The pastels are really picking up that texture and making it more obvious. My son also wanted to help with her blushing. He gets really excited when I make monster or alien girls. I'm going to jump back to the pipe for a bit. Almost everything was painted at this point, and it was looking a bit flat to me. The pipe in particular is nice and shiny, but I wanted more texture and grit. I'm using a makeup sponge that I cut in half and am dabbing a reddish brown color around to look like rust. A few people have told me that this looks like blood. That wasn't my intention, but it still works with the whole monster plant thing. I roughly mix in a cinnamon color, hoping to make it look more rust-like. The painted grass is also lackluster, so I wanted to try flocking it with yarn instead. I fold over a bit of yarn a few times, then cut it into tiny pieces with my thread snips. I do this until I think I have more than enough. Then I drizzle and spread some glue over the base. I take the cut yarn and push it into the glue. I work in small sections so that the glue doesn't dry before I can add the yarn to it. After it dried, I scraped off the excess and did another layer of flocking. I ended up having a lot left over, so I'll be saving that for another project. Time for the face up! I give the head a spray with Mr. Super Clear while wearing a respirator and goggles. For this face up, I'll be primarily using my Caran d'Ache Supracolor Watercolor pencils. I start sketching in a medium brown. I have a small set of these pencils, so I didn't have a color that was closer to her skin tone. I tried just sketching one eye this time instead of mirroring each stroke as I work. I don't know how people can paint an entire side of the face, then make the other side match perfectly. Trying to even just do the eye shape one at a time was more difficult for me, so as you can see, I gave up. I'm using a white charcoal pencil to add the whites of her eyes. I wanted to give her red irises. The primary color of the Piranha plant are green, red, and white. So I'm trying to add each of these colors into the character design where I can. Her hair is green, so it makes sense to have red eyes. I wasn't sure how heavy I wanted her makeup to be yet. I'm starting with lighter, more natural colors and going darker as I get a feeling for what the character needs. Anna's molded on lashes are atrocious and her eyes are huge. I'm going against the mold, making the eyes smaller and turning the lashes into the upper eyelid. To make this work, I lowered the lashes, following the shape of the original ones, and made the upper lid pretty heavy. I'm going in with black and defining the eye fold. Other than fighting the shape of the eyes, this face-up is pretty similar to how I usually work. With the bedroom eyes and theme of the Collab in mind, I decided to go with the heavier makeup. I'm just going in with black and filling in her eyeliner. I avoid filling the center of the eyeliner so that it makes it look like it's shining. I pump up the green in her eyebrows and add more shading to her irises. I add highlights to her skin using a white charcoal pencil. This will be more transparent when the face is sealed again, and the highlights will be softer. I started giving her red freckles to mirror the white spots on the plant, but I quickly decided they were too red and made her look like she had a rash. I softened the spots with soft pastels. I use a dotting tool to add catch lights to her eyes. Then I go along the bottom of the eye with dark red, drawing in the waterline. Using the same red, I add shadows to her lips. I also add some color over the top of the catch light. This implies a shadow from the upper lid. I'm on a new layer and can add some little details like darker and lighter hairs to the eyebrows. I've also been slowly working in some green into her makeup to balance the red. This is the last layer, and I'm just going over everything again, amping up the brights and deepening the darks. It's a typical villain color scheme, but I add purple pastels to the edge of her eyes anyway. I also add a bit of purple around her face as a cooler tone shadow. Her face is finished, but before sealing, I pop the head back on the body so that I can color match it. I had previously glossed the body so that it looked wet, you know, being a tongue and all, but it will be matte again after I seal everything. I do want her eyes to be glossy though, and give them a coat in Sculpey Gloss Glaze. I make her lips and teeth shiny as well. Almost done! You're seriously a rock star if you've made it this far into the video. Her hair just needs some minor styling. The ends are a bit scraggly and uneven. They get a trim. I want to shorten some of the pieces in the front. I hold this and cut upwards on an angle, tapering the cut. She gets one final cut in the front. Everything is finally coming together. As a final touch, I want to add saliva dripping from the teeth. I drop some UV resin onto the teeth and cure it as it slides down. I don't want to get any resin in her hair though. I also drizzle it around the body and legs. I thought this was more effective than just making everything look wet. I actually ran out of my small bottle of resin, and thankfully a new, bigger bottle had just arrived. This new bottle cured much faster and more clearly. I think my old resin was starting to go bad. I did accidentally leave it in the freezing garage over the winter. With a little more slime, she's done. This is probably the most ambitious and time-consuming doll that I've done. I'm not even sure I should call her a doll. She's like 90% sculpted and immobile anyway. Hopefully I didn't veer too far off of the sexy theme and too deep into the creepy territory. Hang around after the photos to see everyone's finished dolls, and don't forget to check out their videos too. This was an awesome group to work with. I've been a fan of literally everyone here since I started. Don't forget that there are links to everyone's videos in the description box below. See you next time. I'm